Small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Let's go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UnFuckIt discussion. We are at the end of April. The end of April, and apparently spring is going to appear in most of the northern hemisphere. It looks pretty positive from what I'm seeing from people so far. Perhaps Canada may actually have spring now. Maybe. Although some areas of the States, I'm not so sure that they think it's springtime. And yeah, we finally got spring here in Malta, thank fucking God. It's the end of April. So it's going to be a short show tonight because I'm sick and I've got to be up really ridiculously early in the morning for meetings. So I'm going to have to actually go to bed at a decent time. Ha 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 ha. We've got a couple of things I want to talk about. So we've just been talking before, as you know, our usual pre-show chit-chat, talking about Notre Dame and talking about the burning of Notre Dame. And I just put a post out on Facebook and on PocketNet talking about the disgustingness of just never mind it's a false flag, it's not who did it and all the rest of it and why, never leaving that aside. Just the very fact that these billionaires jump up and within like 48 hours they've raised $1 billion with a B, $1 billion. Over $1 billion has been raised from private people to, rebuild Notre Dame, blah, 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 blah. Notre Dame, which is a Catholic church owned by the Vatican, which is the richest corporation in the world, that owns all the land, that owns all the gold, etc. And these private people come forward instantly overflowing with money. And Fred was saying, the Yellow Vests really made a big, strong statement about it this weekend in their chapter 23 of protests, saying, kind of like, okay, it's like a building. It's a building. It's a nice building, but it's a building. That kind of money could have housed pretty much all the homeless people in all of France for $1 billion. You could wipe out a huge amount of student debt. You could do like there's so much that could have been done with $1 billion other than fixing a burned down church. It's the Vatican's job to do it anyway. Let the rich fucking corporation do it. And what I pointed out was the news that came by is that if you guys have been watching the news with all the floods, etc., Mozambique down in Africa, over 1,000 people are dead from the flooding and mass horrific natural disasters they've had there. And they've just had to go to the IMF, and the IMF is lending them $168 million. That's it, $168 million to rebuild infrastructure. But of course, the IMF is taking control of all their assets, all their gold, all their hard assets will be controlled by the IMF. And it's just a loan. Remember, this is not a gift. They have to pay back that $168 million with interest to the IMF. In the meantime, the IMF gets control of all the country's assets. What would $1 billion do in a place like this? What would $1 billion do? Like, you could take $1 billion and pick 10 devastated areas and give them each $100 million to rebuild infrastructures and roads and schools and sewage, etc., etc. We've got Pakistan. You've got multiple areas in Africa. Uganda just got hit with another big, massive flood. We've got areas all over South America, Southeast Asia that have been devastated. And has anyone jumped in to volunteer to just give millions and millions of dollars to those causes? No, because no one gives a shit. And it doesn't serve their agenda. And someone made the very smart aleck comment of thank you, Laura, it was awesome, saying, yeah, but you don't get to meet the Pope by volunteering to donate $200 million to Africa. You only get to meet the Pope if you just volunteer $200 million to fix a cathedral that the Catholic Church should just fix themselves. So regardless of all the other stuff, regardless of all the other massive questions we have about Notre Dame, and there's a lot of fucking questions, just that one aspect of it, so disgusting, so completely indicative of society as a whole right now. Oh, Fred, I am sure that Notre Dame was fucking insured. I am sure that it was insured. It was probably insured for something absolutely fucking ridiculous amount of money. Because all those landmarks are insured. They're all insured. So I guarantee there was probably some kind of insurance policy on it. So, yeah. That's just my one little piece today. That's been one piece that's really been just really, really pissing me off. If it hadn't been for the fact that I had been sick and literally so absolutely swamped for the last week, I wanted to put together a new show to cover the insanity of the last 2 weeks. It's just the shit that's come out in the last 2 weeks is there are no words anymore. Like we can't. Insanity as a word doesn't even cover this stuff anymore. It's well above and beyond insanity. Yeah, and Ben, yeah, happy Easter, exactly. So all this fucking shit happens the week before Easter, during Easter, we have the massacre in Sri Lanka. Oh, why is no one, sending $200 million to Sri Lanka? Is anyone doing that? Anyone? No, no one's sending $200 million or $100 million or even $10 million privately to Sri Lanka. Yeah. It's a sacrificial season. I'm sorry, but and this year is just too much this year. I can't even talk about it. Literally, I don't want to get into it. Ben, darling, get me on another topic quick. I want to talk about the meetings you had, and maybe you can give a little bit of a prelim what you guys are doing, and then these meetings that you've had, because I'm really excited. I've been wanting to hear about this.
Oh, you want to go fun stuff? I was gonna. Yeah. So we've been chatting with some of the mobs over here, and by mobs, I mean tribes. The mobs are what they sort of refer to themselves as opposed to the mafia. So I've learnt that dealing with Canada over the last little while.
Can't see.
They've been
you
looking
have
at
to
us quite
explain that
strangely when we
mobs
like
is
so.
actually their
So
own
this mob, yeah. Well, yeah, they're just whatever country they come from, but yeah, they sort of have clans and mobs. But yeah, it's sort of when like, why are you looking at me funny? Like, you guys dealing with the mafia? So no.
No, not that kind of mob. Not that kind of mob.
So yeah, we're basically over the last while of knowing Dee, and sometime before that, we've been going through our process of trying to set up our little bubble to be able to function in. And in doing so, hemp and medicinal marijuana have subsequently started to become a bit more legal in certain areas. So in recognizing that re-emerging hemp and cannabis industry, and it being such an old valued plant in and of itself, we decided that we would start talking to the autochtons and the First Nations basically around the world. So us being based in Australia, we've started speaking here to a few of the mobs around the place and presenting them with a model that we can help create a First Nations global industry based around hemp and its properties and products. So yeah, that's been moving here quite nicely, and we've got our first sort of go ahead from one of our local clans up here, and then we've got subsequent meetings coming up over the next 2 and 3 weeks that start venturing up through the states on the east coast of Australia. So that's where that sort of stuff is at. And in doing that, of course, we're being able to put our accelerated natural systems, which is our version of modern but not so modern, as it turns out to be, agriculture. And in doing that, we're finding out a lot of cool stuff, a lot of very, very cool stuff. So one of my brothers is a fire custodian, and his teacher is from up north, where they still hold a lot of the ancient law. One of the cool things that has just recently happened is he took a trip to Canada and got to spend some time with the tribes up in Canada. So bearing in mind that when he went, it was end of winter, okay? So he went out with some of the chiefs and some scientists and some environmental politicians and whatnot, and walked off into the conifer forests up in the hills in the middle of the snow and grabbed a handful of soil and basically said, "This is my soil. This is soil from my mountains. My trees back home make this soil. This is the type of fire this forest needs."
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm going to light this fire, and it's going to do this, and then it's going to do this, and then it's going to do this." And he lit the fire, and it did exactly what he said. And all the chiefs were like, "Oh, we remember." So it would seem that what we're actually tapping into is an actual universal LORE that is starting to unfold.
Oh, very cool.
And it's actually very cool, because what I found really funny is this conversation, the pre-conversation, was all about the Catholic Church and this, that, the other, and it would just so happen one of our astrologers in this group sent me a paper by Aristotle on meteorology. And I started reading it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is very, very interesting, because in this paper, he's describing in, his terminology, LORE. And I'm sort of kind of like now tripping balls a little bit, because as I was looking into this, he actually calls the Earth, but he calls space the world. And the world, the Earth is contained within the world. And the world is where the planets are. So when we start talking about the universal Roman Catholic, or the Roman Catholic Church, or the universal Roman Church, or the universal Roman Bank, which is what those words all mean, okay? Catholic, universal, Roman Church is bank. In that papal bull Unum Sanctum, where they deposited the world, and I was making assumptions that they had created a new title for the Earth, it may be that they have actually deposited the universe, or at that point the known universe, into this trust. And from what Aristotle is stating in this book on meteorology and the history of meteorology and the history of the elements, they've known about LORE for some time. And
you'd expect so, right? Like,
but I mean, right down to how each planet interplays on its node in its point on Earth, and whether it's going to be an earthquake or a volcano or a flood or rain or.
And we know that these guys knew this stuff before, because it was too well known across the cultures. Whether you were talking about the ancient Greeks, whether you were talking about Phoenicians, the Egyptians, pick a fucking culture, they all had this knowledge. So therefore, it has to be the hidden pieces that are quasi-modern hidden to keep us from knowing it.
Yeah, well, what I'm actually finding as well is in his explanations, he's explaining the law of fire and how fire interacts with air, water, and earth, and the charges and discharges that occur in those sequence through those four elements.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've started finding with our fire custodial practices is these things, these practices from fire ceremony to water ceremony have direct implications and direct effect without aeroplanes in the sky doing chemtrails, without having to create HARP and fucking these CERN and all these things. It's literally being able to be done through and by our interaction. So the implication with Notre Dame, and not to get all sort of exoteric and woo-woo with it, but the implication of those things, the fire, which activates the air, which activates the water, and up in and through the firmaments, because what Aristotle's talking about is inner world, outer world, things that happen this side of the moon and that side of the moon, and what their implications are, and whether they are affecting air, fire, earth, or water. So we're starting to find that exoterically, there's a lot of the stuff is actually it's very bang on it.
So
and it would seem
esoteric
that
and exoteric?
yeah, both.
Yeah.
So it would seem that our First Nations people are well equipped and working towards sorting some shit out, and it's having some pretty immense effect.
So it's just a matter of, can you get them all to the table at the same time? Because I mean, that seems to have been the downfall continually is getting.
Well, so let's not go there. Let's not go there.
No.
We won't bring that. We won't create that entity, because what's going on is they're coming to the table.
Okay, good.
They're hearing our story, and it seems that our story is exactly their story. So there's this union that's going on, and they're actually all coming to the table together. So it's not about whether we can, they are.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
And that's what I'm saying is the things that are happening are having and this is, I guess, where the benefit of living in the rainforest is, because as we sort of have talked about some of the doom and gloom that's going on out there, it's quite hard to see from here, which is why I have to keep very up to date with news and that kind of stuff. Because I mean, a week ago Tuesday, I went for a drive and I saw 7 different rainbows. 3 were double rainbows, and for not lying, 2 of them ended up on the bonnet of my truck while driving. I ended up having an osprey falcon in my hands 2 days ago. It landed in my chicken coop and then let me pick it up. So there's some very like.
And only Ben's the type of person who would go into the chicken coop and pick up an osprey falcon.
Well, it let me. It literally sat on the ground, and so it was quite weird. So there is like amazing stuff going on, because even as my brother and my auntie and my uncle over here are going out and talking to their people, there's lots of healing going on. There's lots of rifts that are happening. There's lots of what would we call it? Remembering going on, and it's actually really quite intense. It's pretty, it almost puts imagination to shame with some of the things that are transpiring. It's very, very cool. It's very, very, very cool. And on the same note, Graham Hancock is currently doing his American tour for his book on the Americas.
Yeah.
And D if anyone could go watch his latest show, which happened I think 2 days ago on Joe Rogan, he starts talking about some things
I
that
want
are
to
now
watch
apparently. Well, so there's apparently some things that are now, they're still not 100%, but basically they are now strongly regarded as the more potential hypothesis for the occurrences of things. And what I'm talking about is things like, you've heard us talk over the many years about things like the soil, terra preta.
Yep.
It's now being actually said that this soil was created by human interaction. It's not jungle soil. It's not something that happened. This is happened.
Yep.
So therefore, even scientists now cannot figure out how they figured out how to make this soil the way that they did. And on another note, they're now saying that the placement of the species of plants in the Amazon is not natural.
In what way? Like,
that
define that better?
in the way that it has been planted out like a farm or an orchard.
Oh, interesting.
It's not done. It's not done by natural disbursement.
Huh. I'm gonna have to watch that. That's Joe Rogan a couple of days ago. I'll try and pull up the link.
Yeah, it's 1254. I think it is. Show 1254. I think, but yeah, he goes into a lot of these bits and pieces on the new potential hypotheses of the movement of humankind and its disbursement, and they're now actually stating that the Meso and South American tribes have genetic markers back to the origines in Australia.
No duh. I mean, like, this is the kind of shit that we've talked about for fucking years, and I love the fact that you're like, it's like, 5 years later, someone's starting to put proof on the table of these things.
Yeah, so it's becoming quite cool because a lot of the practices and the custodial duty of care things that we're looking at now are actually being found historically to be factual.
Yeah, well, I always wonder, when we talk about things, for example, and I over years I've talked about all the time, of course, the petroglyphs. The petroglyphs specifically that Gary Vay talks about on the, what's his site called? ViewZone. And he's been all over the world. From the first petroglyphs that he knew about were found in like Colorado, in different places of North America. And it's a writing system. Not just cave pictures, but an actual writing system. And they found the same writing in Australia. They found the same writing in Yemen, the same writing in Africa, the same writing in areas of Northern Europe. And they just keep uncovering, and it's the same writing system. So when we talk about the spread of the races, the spread of humanity, let's just say the spread of humanity, and how they're all intermingled. I mean, when we have literal physical evidence, things like fucking pyramids all over the goddamn planet, everywhere. Fucking pyramids. China, Australia, Egypt, Bosnia, North America, South America. Certain things just keep repeating patterns. And how can you hide this from the public that it's very obvious that they all have to be interconnected? At one point in time, the knowledge had to all be interconnected. You can't hide it forever.
Is interconnected.
No, is. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Is interconnected. Yes. Is. Pardon my past.
That's kind of where the crux is. It's like when you really look at it, you're kind of just starting to see the fiction for the fiction. So all those things that have been written are starting to become unstable as more information becomes available, because you have the ability to refine definitions.
Yep.
So we're slowly, well, actually not really, we're quite quickly at the moment seeing that which was classified as flora and fauna in a potentially negative way, and I mean pretty much most First Nations around the world, when the colonists got there, classified them as flora and fauna, which was seen as a very bad thing. However, I'd also like to propose that potentially that was recognition of them being autochtons as opposed to indigenous. And
Say
what
again?
I mean by autochton,
Yeah.
autochton or autochthonous, it means of the soil, whereas indigenous or native, bless you, twice. Is it going to be free?
Sorry, excuse me.
No.
The dust storm is still fucking raging around here.
Autochton means of the earth.
Of the land.
So, whereas native,
Okay, wait. Does it mean
indigenous
of the land, or
be
does it mean of the earth? Given the
of,
fact that, like what you just said, the
of
earth.
the soil.
Okay.
Of the soil.
Yeah. Okay.
Which you know, that goes into my other hypothesis of the avatar. But anyway, I forgot where I was going with that now. But yeah, it's becoming quite apparent that these peoples and their practices were, and I can't stress this enough, were the interplay that kept balance because of their comprehension of the interaction of the four elements, essentially.
And the comprehension of the balance, and that they kept the balance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's all got to do with trees, and the trees bringing in the energy that create the soil. That it's
and the water and the air and the. There you go. You talk about the 5 elements, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I'm Aristotle. And not that I'm saying that, you know, I'm not questioning Aristotle. I'm just putting out another theory. Aristotle claims that the water is made from air, and I'm starting to wonder whether it's actually soil. It's actually biology that creates water.
Yeah.
And its interaction with nitrogen.
Which could be kind of classified as air, nitrogen.
Well, nitrogen is part of the air. Yes,
I'm just saying.
Yes. Part of, yes. But yeah, it gets really, really interesting. It gets really, really interesting. And it doesn't get complicated in any way, shape, or form.
I'm sure it does. I know it does.
No, well, like I say, I know you hate me saying it.
Even if it is, Ben, only complicated is as we take it and as we digest the information, right? Because it becomes complicated when we have to take apart our preconceived ideas, our preconceived belief structures, our preconceived programming before we can fully comprehend to move forward with the simplicity that it is, right? Like that's the difficulty is wrapping your head around a new idea or an old idea. Sorry.
Yeah, it's complicated in comparison to.
In comparison to, yeah,
exactly. Everything else, because everything else has been dissected so far apart to actually then see it in another way. It's like I say, it's literally as simple as positive and negative, and each one of those things having a variant of temp, hot or cold.
Well, Jules just said earth and water are magnetic, so that makes more sense, while fire and air are electric. So,
Yep.
That's again the balance.
They're birthed from. Yeah. Well, it is here.
So here's my thing. Let's because we always talk about the positive, the negative, or magnetic, electric, and we talk about balance. And the one thing I've been talking about nonstop, pretty much I've probably bored everyone to tears, is talking about all the events that are happening geomagnetically in these massive electrical events, plasma discharge, etc. Could we take it as we are experiencing a rebalancing of the polarities? Does that make sense? Because that's one of my questions that I've had is people talk about it in cycles, people talk about it in these grand catastrophic cycles, but are we looking at a rebalancing? If we look at, for example, even just what we as corporations and everything has done to the planet, right? The raping of the planet, the distortion of the water, the airs, etc., and literally the magnetic fields of the planet and electrical fields. Are we seeing right now, do you think, that rebalancing point where we're seeing all this shit firing off because there has to be a point where everything comes back into harmony again? Okay, Ben, hit
What
me.
what I now, hang on, I'm thinking, I hypothesize is that that's exactly what is going on, minus what we should be doing. And when we start doing what we should be doing, it's kind of, okay. So here we
when you
sit
say
there
we,
and
we're talking about
okay,
mankind, like
Yep.
all of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
As the collective,
Yeah.
collective. In each of our respective faculties, and not all of us have realized what our specialty is yet. But much the same as like we see them doing their grids in the sky with the chemtrails, and then they may jack up HARP or CERN or whatever it is. That does have effect. Much the same as us burning our sacred sites and or performing some ceremony at our sacred sites.
Yeah.
That kind of helps. So if you picture it as like a circuit that's going off, it's firing without it's reaching capacity, and it's just going off.
Yeah.
Whereas via our interplay, we can discharge that in different ways via ceremony and fire and bringing in the rains and things like that. So it would seem that things may have just got out of disarray because we were distracted out of that. And like I say, much like the elder going to Canada and showing that there's actually a universal law based on soil, we see that there, like I say, that it's not just someone going, oh, but it's written and therefore it is. It's like, well, I can show you that your land or your country reacts the same to our interaction, the same as my country based on this.
Yeah.
And it has great effect.
Yeah. Well,
see,
hold on.
the fires. I'll just check.
My daughters were being noisy in the living room, so I just had to, bellow down the hallway to yell at them for a second. Well, this is it. I mean, and I talked about this just a couple of weeks ago. And you bring up First Nations. So, like I said, I have a friend who is in the Mohawk Nation in Canada. And he talked about the fact of, you talk about ceremony, right? And when him and his brother went to go watch a big Canadian government-sponsored powwow, to bring all the tourists in and generate money. And they were doing a dance, and there was one of the traditional dances, and he freaked out because he said they were dancing in the wrong direction. And him and his brother were like, why are they going? And it's like, if they were going clockwise, they were supposed to have been going counterclockwise. Whichever direction they were dancing in, they were supposed to be doing that dance in the opposite direction. And when he got one of the chief dancers aside afterwards and said, what were you doing He would say, well, that's how we were told to do it. And who told them to do it? Well, some government guy, who organizes all these things, told them to dance it in this direction. And he was saying to him, do you understand that you just went in the opposing direction? Like you just fucked the entire ceremony because you just did it in the complete wrong direction. So this kind of shit is continuously going on, because if they, the quintessential they, comprehend ceremony, which we have to assume that they have at least some of the original knowledge somewhere floating around up there, they're going to do what they can to counteract those ceremonies, because you have to disprove the power. So if you can have people go up and do a powwow and do a big dance and do what is full ceremony, but do it wrong, do it in the opposite direction, etc., therefore there is no response, there's nothing that is seen or experienced from it, then it just becomes, just a quaint little thing that you can sell to the tourists. Unimportant. By perception, I mean. Like, as in, it becomes, they make it seem unimportant. What the hell? I just had an ant crawling on my head. What the hell? Seriously?
Danny, that reminds me of that part Michael Tassarian said about all the indigenous people, shamans, and what you had when they were making their dances and their rituals. They were trying to get Earth back into that shape that it can help itself, right? So, and everybody who thinks that this is just some malarkey or some bullshit these people are making, no, it's not. These people knew this. This was knowledge that was given from person to person, right? And what did the church do? The first thing they landed, they slaughtered these people. They burned the books. They did everything to erase it.
And you'll put your children in residential schools, so therefore if the children are taken away from the parents and the grandparents and the aunties and the uncles can't pass down that knowledge.
Just think what
children are indoctrinated in the schools.
Just think what Ben just said earlier.
Yeah, we still are, Ben.
That idea he has, or this whole practice is actually fairly easy, right? If you are not filled in your mind with garbage we learned at schools, right? Then it is a no-brainer. How do you do these things? But now we have our brains filled with all these crap that works actually, but doesn't work in a healthy way, right? But if you didn't have that knowledge, it would be easier to understand.
And rest assured that before they killed them and or divided them and all the rest of it, they damn sure recorded all of it.
Oh, guaranteed. And it'd go right back to the Vatican.
No, I mean,
and their archives.
But D, we've got elders telling us of NASA coming down and asking specific questions about this and that and the other, like in the 70s. So
really?
Yeah. So we know, and they are now remembering why this stuff all happened, and they're now remembering what and realizing why these questions were being asked.
Yeah.
So the great remembering is literally transpiring like wildfire.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy, and it's fucking amazing. There will be drone footage coming soon. It's very cool. There's some very, very cool stuff going on across the world. And like I say, there's more and more verification coming out that things were not what we were told in any way, shape or form. Well,
and the idea of remembering, we've talked about this for years, as well as the fact of there's almost like a, even those, if you don't want to get into the whole new agey ascension oneness type thing, but there's a consciousness that is pervasive, that we hear the stories all the time. You and I have had so many fucking conversations about this, where you have an idea pops into the head of a young inventor in Russia, but simultaneously the exact same idea pops into the head of somebody in Australia, North America, South America, somewhere in the heart of Africa, and they all start working on this same thing all at once. All at once, and you know that it's not a collaboration. You know that it's. But when the time has come, the information will come out, and it's like it comes out across the board. Like you say, it's not just one person. It's like you get hot spots that appear, and these ideas come out.
Well, and then when you add the fact that essentially it would seem that at some point across the globe, all our peoples were connected. It may have been via ceremony and or some kind of ethno-botanical interaction.
Yep.
Through the ayahuasca, marijuana.
Oh, that kind of. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about literal connections of like the mycelium.
Yeah. No. Well, there is that going on as well. But I mean, like, it starts like it's full on like Avatar stuff, like the things that like Paul, like when you start connecting all these people's specialties from the Graham Hancocks and the John Anthony Wests right through to the Paul Stamets and the Elaine Inghams, and then you start looking at the cultural stories and the interactions, and then it's Avatar. I mean, if I can get my cameras going, like my forest is currently glowing. Like we got blue and white and green luminescent fungi going off at the moment. It's like it's Avatar, full on Avatar. And those interactions, like when Stamets talks about what the mycelium does, when you look at the test that they did in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s with things like LSD and psilocybin and all these sorts of things that have been going on, it starts to actually, when you start actually putting them together in their sequence of where they stand on an actual scale, humanity is definitely not what we've been sold it as. No. And is far more interconnected, and the potential with things like these ceremonies and psychoactive substances, which you've got to look at them all as that it's just different compounds playing different roles. Yeah, that's all it is. It's not someone doing drugs or taking this or that kind of stuff. And they used to do this stuff a lot, right down to like making mead with psilocybin mushrooms, right? Yep. And it was quite funny that I think Megan, put out that Pluto's doing something that hasn't done since the 1500s. And it was in the 1500s that there was the Bavarian Bear Act, and they banned using mushrooms in all of their alcohols. Yeah. So in the 1500s, at this same cycle of events that is transpiring in the sky at the moment, they took away mushrooms, and right now they're throwing mushrooms straight back on the table as an actual curative for some pretty serious stuff.
You know what's really interesting about mushrooms? And I'm laughing because you're bringing it up. My news feed on Facebook has been filled. Now, granted, I have lots and lots of friends who are wild crafters, who are into wild gathering mushrooms, etc. But my feed has been filled with people showing the mushrooms they've just collected today. And all kinds, and from all over the world, South America, North America, Europe, Australia, and like going, oh, look at these beauties that I got today. One guy with a mushroom on a wagon, and the stalk of the mushroom is this big around. And the head of the mushroom it's like torpedo shaped. The head has to be over a meter long. And he says, and this is edible. And he's like, this is edible. I'm like, okay, like that's enough mushroom to feed an entire city for a month.
You know what's so funny about what you two just said? Mushrooms are literally like one of nature's finest garbage disposals, right? Like they clean stuff up, they make it whole again, right? But also there are other mushrooms that are not so nice. But anyway, what I was pointing out, especially the avatar world, keep in mind there are some mushrooms that go miles and miles and miles around the earth, right? Like you have plants, you have mushrooms, not the same species, they're different, but still they all have these root networks, right? We had huge forests back then.
I'd just like to interject and state that we're actually closer related to mushrooms than any other kingdom. And
I know
it's actually, if you, well, everyone jokes like that, D. However, it would actually bode that we are fungal masses.
You mean we're kept in the dark and fed bullshit nonstop?
Exactly.
Hey, Ben, I've been listening to what you've been saying completely. And in my language, what you're describing to me is that there's been an esoteric knowledge, the hidden knowledge of the elders that's been held private and very, very localized within the groups of the groups. That really, we live in a holistic world. And we've been sold, which is the overlay, is one way to express it, is that these incidences are isolated and separate and unrelated. And that's what the exoteric message has been for at least 2,000 years. And what's happening now is that hidden knowledge is coming out. And it's not just because the elders are dispensing it, although they are to some degree, as Ben is talking about, but it's coming in to people like us who don't have access to these elders along the way, but we're still getting that message. And that's what I think is the underwriting or the overriding message that you're transmitting by showing, this, that, and the other thing. It's telling me that this whole system, this whole thing is holistic. It's all related. It's not isolated. Which again, I guess that's my major point. We've been sold the idea that all this stuff is unrelated and isolated incidences, and it's kept us divided one against the other in a lot of ways. And that's a lie that we've been fed. And it's not coming from the original source, it's coming from an imposition. And I think that's really what I wanted to say in a short period of time. That's what I'm hearing you say. And Danny's, pretty much, well, she's in agreement with that. And then like I say, I just offered my way of expressing it.
Moksha, that's really, really interesting. And Moksha just said the internet is one, as in another, like that network that just spreads globally all over the place. Another one is the blockchain, right? And my fumbling around in my head over the last year especially has been,
look how they've been trying to censor it. Look how they've been trying to censor it, like the internet, trying to,
Exactly. And that's been coming for a long time. Like that's not.
Yeah, but they've been really pushing it now because they know that, oh crap, the stuff we've been doing is not working. Our false flags, they're seeing right through it.
Right. And this is why I look at, so for example, then you have the launch of the blockchain, which is unalterable. Once a post goes on the blockchain, it's on the blockchain. No one can remove it. If anyone does remove it, everyone in every node can see that there's a big fucking broken chain link and knows that something has been removed and can all go, you removed that, you're fucked, right? So when I look at that interconnectivity and consciousness, again, of like, when the consciousness needs to expand, the communication needs to retouch to everyone again. And then all of a sudden you have the internet, which has allowed us to reach out and talk to people in North America, Australia. I'm in Malta. We've got people over in Romania, in Sweden, all of us all hooked up right this very second. all interconnected. So then that gets kind of, it's like that starts to get decrepit and pulled and polluted, if you will, and take it down. And then the next connection comes in. But what's the one connection that no one can fuck with? And that is the actual connection.
The human connection.
Human connection.
The human connection.
They can't fuck with that.
Oh, when you were
Now,
talking about the mushrooms being linked with humans, then I started thinking, oh, sorry, but your princess is in another castle. Yeah, it's weird how you hear about certain things and they sort of get put together, you know.
Yep.
Where you wouldn't think they would be linked, you know.
And that's just it. It's the I guess the segregation of it all that has made it confusing. It's like, you know, I think I've said this story a few times. My whole metaphor is kind of like you get a fruit tree, you plant it, you've made the compost, it starts growing really well, you're looking after it, starts producing fruit, you meet a girl or a boy, you have a family, or you don't, you just have a life, and you get busy, and then it starts not producing fruit so much, and then it's not producing fruit, and then you think that it's just a tree that's gone bad, but it's a tree that's just missing your interaction, but it's still doing all of its functions except for the fruit. So the aspect of our interaction is starting to show the deficit in nature.
Yep. I agree. And as you pay attention to it, it flourishes again.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's like people are questioning again. People are asking questions. People are putting these sorts of things together, which is painting another picture.
Ben,
and that other picture.
Here. Hold on, Bossy. Just wait.
No. Say, go on.
We have a miss over here. There are some trees in Germany. I can't remember that specific name, but I can ask my friend who knows this. There is like a tree they planted in the town square, right? Like in the center of the town back then. It was like a biggish tree that looked really cool. But these trees in the nature didn't grow to the same amount they did in the center of the city, because the miss is that these trees require attention or admiration, right? Like, oh my God, this is such a nice tree. This tree grows bigger and fucking tough, right? Compared to nature outside. But then you have in nature these gigantic, massive trees that don't give a fuck if anyone cares about it. They are just. And this is,
exist.
Like Ben said, like this tree doesn't get the attention. There's nobody nurturing it. So why would it produce, right?
Well, there's that exact part, but then what? Just to throw another thing in there, because we can, is like in working in this hemp industry and even just looking at the hemp plant, it's like in Canada alone, if the exact same species is grown here at exactly the same time as over here, one of them can grow 12 foot tall, and the other one will only grow 4 foot. And then the same kind of variances happen in winter and summer. So when we go into like the cosmological botany and things like that, we're also starting to see that plants are actually are literally telling us things about the energy in those areas.
Yep.
So when we start looking at like fire custodianship and stuff like that, they look at the trees. And oh man, like it, it's a fucking trip.
Well, listen, you know what's funny?
Go D.
Just to go off of Bossy's point. Just today, I'm scrolling through my local Go Zone, which is a Facebook group that's all people here who live in this island. Mostly expats, but lots of locals. And someone posted a picture. So one of the big villages here, the village of Nador, has got a very, for the size of the town, has got a very big main square, the big church square, the piazza. has always had lining the square these beautiful trees. And these trees have been there for a shit long time, and they're kept very, very trim. So you know when they get to the point where the top leaves are just so dense because they're kept trimmed perfectly, beautifully into a nice ball shape. Well, they decided they were going to renovate the square, and they took all those trees out of the square and put them in a field outside the village. And someone posted a picture and said, it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And she showed a picture of the trees in the square, where the squares here in Malta, the squares where everything happened. The piazzas where everyone meets, where you sit and you have coffee, where you chat with your neighbors, where you have all these events. It's all centered around the village square. And they took all those trees out and they put them out in the field while they renovated and were doing work on the square. All the trees have not a single leaf on them, not even one. They look like just dead stumps now. And she said it's the saddest thing. But that's the first thing when you said that, Bossy, that made me think of that, of like,
Yeah,
oh my God, they've been
and hey,
surrounded by all this energy of all these people who always, because the trees are beautiful and
yes,
they're
yes, yes.
beautifully maintained. And then all of a sudden they take them out of that and they put them out in the field where they're
Yeah,
adored.
I mean, why would we think like a cat is something different, so much different from a tree or from a bush or from a flower, right? They want attention too. But see, here we are again at Science World Today. Science World Today would say, that tree grown bad because you took it out of the soil, put it somewhere else, so the roots aren't that good anymore in the ground, and that was the disturbance. But yeah, well, if you see it from a different point, we have the saying, where attention goes, energy flows, right? I walk every day over here in my park, and there is like an area they gave to the people where they could plant trees or plant fruits or whatever, right? Or flowers and whatnot. And you see, compared to the rest of the park, this spot is always blooming because people go there to work and come back. They always admire it.
Yeah.
They feed energy to that spot, so to speak.
Yep. Well, you know what? John just made a really interesting point too, and this is really, really true. A house that is abandoned will degrade at an astonishing rate. Now, this is also true, and we see it here in Gozo. You can see, and Jenny can tell you this because I mean she looks after patients in some of these really 300- and 400-year-old houses. And yeah, maybe they're kind of a little ugly, and just interior design could be cleaned up a little, but those houses are like as solid as they come. There was a house up the road here. The first summer we moved into this place, they tore it down, and I was devastated because you could tell this was a beautiful old house, and it hadn't been lived in 20 years, and the stone was rotting. The stone, literally the limestone, was crumbling off the house, just rotting. Now, people say, oh, there's good limestone and there's bad limestone, and where it's quarried makes a difference. But almost across the board, you see that. These houses that have been abandoned, all of a sudden the stone itself literally starts to fall apart.
And what's the next thing that happens?
Then humans come along and fucking
nature just goes and fucking engulfs it.
And that's so funny because where they've destroyed this house, by law here, you can't leave an empty lot because people will just go and throw garbage in it. So what they did is they knocked down 99% of the house, and but the front wall has been mostly laid intact, and then they've just built up a brick wall. There's like an entryway that's been left open with just a chain across it. What was originally the inner courtyard of that house, because the houses here were all built in the Roman styling with the inner courtyards, the flowers have taken over. The entire space now of what was the inside of this house is nothing but wild flowers and plants that are like a meter tall, and it's just taken over. Like you just said, nature's just taking the whole area back.
Well, and that's one of the things that Graham Hancock goes into is like the with the subsequent clearing of the Amazon rainforest for soybean plantings, they've discovered quite a few more cultural sites. And in doing that, they've started scanning, like doing this infrared or laser scanning of the jungles. And they're like,
finding
oh,
all
snap.
kinds of shit hidden in the deep dark jungle.
So, and in doing so, have found connections across the globe, right? But in doing so, it's starting to look like a large portion of the Amazon is only like 700 to like 1,000 years old. So it's not this thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years old forest. It's forest that's actually, since civilizations have been in there and had their civilization, it's gone whoom.
And they've planted it, like you said, like orchards.
Well, yeah. So if you add into that whole aspect of the Terra Prieta, and part of the Terra Prieta process would seem that it involves fire because of the charcoal content, right? So we start seeing these custodial practices that happen for eons upon eons. Like we're looking at verification of 120,000 years to 130,000 in Australia, and they're proposing that as the same kind of date format for South America, right?
Right.
So this, and with this jungle only being 700 years old, sort of 1,000 years old, that's not that old.
No.
You know, when you've got redwoods, when you've got the redwoods that are a few thousand years old.
Yep.
And you've got a rainforest that's just engulfed.
Ben, don't you have
entire cities?
Don't you have a different soil layer, like where you have those gigantic trees, you have a much deeper soil layer that is actually fruitful? And when you have the Amazon, you know, when you cut down the trees and the rain comes and the soil,
it's actually
is so thin, right?
It's different.
Rainforest soil is actually not very productive.
It doesn't
it's
grow.
Kind
it's
of like
rather thin, right? The thin layer.
It's just different soil. So it's kind of like the whole water process. It's like we've spoken about, the water that comes out of the springs is hydrocarbonated water. So if you drink lots of it, it's actually not good for you. That water needs some sunlight to decarboxylate, lose some of the carbons out of it, and then it becomes healthier water. The soil in the rainforest is not the most productive soil, and this is what they're starting to find with these soy farms, because they're cutting down the rainforest, trying to plant into it, and it's just not good. So they're having to do all this stuff and add all this fertilizer, which then, you know, burns it, and they can only use it for a few years, and then they've got to cut down more forest.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the application of this whole Terra Prieta soil creation or composting works to create this Terra Prieta, because what they say is the soil in the rainforest is not productive enough to sustain large masses of people. But if you found a soil that basically is self-replicating when organic matter is added onto it, then what you actually have is an agricultural science that's been going on that makes specific soil to be productive.
Exactly. That's why. That's why I meant earlier. The people that bring the soil with them, because the soil that grows, right? I can take a coffin or a box of that soil with me to wherever I go, replicate it, right? Give it food to grow, and I have plenty of space to grow stuff on, right?
That is one potential. What I'm sort of saying is because of our ceremony and our actual interaction, that's what gave the soil the charge. So we can't farm in the same way and expect that same outcome. It actually has to be done ceremonially, essentially, or to LORE.
So the soil is specific to each region of a planet then?
It would seem that soils are endemic to places, but with our interaction, we can make this specific soil.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's certain soils. So for example, we know certain plants grow better in certain regions because the soils suit those plants.
Mm-hmm.
We have certain flowers here.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry guys, I'm losing my voice really badly at this point. We have, for example, we were out walking the salt pans yesterday. And the salt pans is just an amazing area of gozo to walk along, off the cliffs. And you have very interesting plants. There's a breed of chamomile that only grows in 2 places in the world, and that's Gozo and a small island in Greece. There's a breed of thyme that only grows in Gozo and another small island in Greece. And they're extremely medicinal, like really. And I'm all fired up that I want to start producing essential oils because there's so many very old heritage plants here that only grow here. And we joked about it because the soil is shit here. The soil is full of lime. The soil is full of salt. The soil is full of very dry. It's not beautiful, dark, luscious soil that you would find in, say, where the redwoods are or anywhere else. But these plants grow in that soil specifically. And if you take them out, and you could probably try and take chamomiles and try and grow them somewhere else, and they may not grow because
the soil is producing those plants.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get to. The soil itself produces that plant.
And then those terpenes and those compounds that are in those plants, and that's what. So plants are miners, right? Like
exactly.
Everything that comes out of the soil is mining. So it's this whole pump system through osmosis, and it's like quite fantastical. When all the pieces, like, biology, it's like, oh, it makes sense now. It's just the way you explained it was shit. And then you start seeing, like, you start seeing the trees as these sugar water pumps that are literally, through perspiration through their leaves, are what are literally pumping up the water from the vacuum that is soil. And then they're perspiring that through their leaves, and they're bringing sugars up for the bacteria, which are then breeding in that, soil. And that's kind of the whole house degrading without people, and then nature taking over is the perfect example. See, if someone was there to do the lime washes every 7 years and mow the lawns, and it doesn't happen, and that's your interaction with nature going, hey, Mum.
Yep, I'm coming back now. I'm just coming back now. So, shit.
It would fully show that human interaction with nature facilitates nature then knowing what you need and what you want.
Yes, Ben.
So,
like the old gardener or farmer truths over here, or gardener's rule of thumb, so to speak. If you walk through your plant fields barefoot, right, like the plants can sort of catch on.
You need.
Yeah, exactly. Or the idea to take a seed into your mouth, put it into the saliva, and then plant it so that the plant has sort of a connection to your biology, what you need or what you don't need, right?
And just make sure that in that sequence we add in there that when you walk barefoot, it's actually the mycelium that pick it up, and then they are what pass on the information to the plants.
Hey, Benjamin, when we were in Lake Lure, Emily and I went ziplining in the forest, because it's like a rainforest there. And it seems that all the guides for these ziplining services are all into mushrooms. and they search out certain types of mushrooms all up in that shit. So it's interesting that you bring it up because they were all into it.
Foraging in like the Americas is pretty cool because you've got morels and chanterelles, and they're worth quite a lot of money.
That's what they said. That's what they said, and they're all into it.
Yeah. Well, it was funny that we got onto mushrooms. I just did extensions of 6 species about 4 days ago onto some agar slides. So it's culinary and medicinal. So I got lion's mane, reishi, blue oyster, elm oyster, shimoji, and King Strophoria. And we've started putting them into our garden beds now and into the greenhouse garden bed. So we're going to see if we can grow them out in the gardens. So yeah, it's getting pretty cool.
Our friend Spencer is doing the same thing. He's about, if he hasn't started already, about to do a bunch of different kinds. So I don't really understand all that. I'm sure he would, but
we're just basically getting cultures of mushrooms so that we can grow the mushrooms for food. And then, like, because of the work that we're doing, what we're looking at then doing is fitting out a whole bunch of 20-foot containers. So there'll be a mushroom farm in one, and micro herbs and greens in another, and then we're going to start dropping these off and out into the bush and start turning these into little micro enterprises. Because, like I say, when you start putting all these little bits and pieces together, it starts painting a way more fruitful interplay of what's going on. And that's another thing, Dee, that I was sort of wanted to bring up was your show with Ems and Jeff and their show prior to that. Because one thing that's really been knocked home, especially this last weekend, is we've got to remember that where energy flows is where it goes. And even though there's a lot of this bad stuff, it's like Notre Dame. Okay, motherfuckers raised $1 billion in like 24 hours, whatever. Exoterically, I'm sitting there going, add in there with the whole Assange thing and the this and the that and the other, and it could be this entire thing. Whereas I sort of look at the cycles that we're in, and like our wonderful astrologers, Jules and Megan, it's like the way I'm looking at this is like Notre Dame that was built on a feminine thing. Fire just came in and cleansed something, and it's actually a cycle. It's a cycle thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And it's showing to me this other side of things, and where energy goes, is what's.
There's a mysterious part to this because there was footage that came out that showed a dark figure at the top of the Notre Dame deal, and all of a sudden you see this flash of light.
He had a clipboard or something. I looked at that and I was like, if he was a construction guy and he had like one of those metal back clipboards, because it was perfectly square, it was a flash of light. It was like he had something in his hand that caught the sunlight, and it just flickered for a second.
I didn't see the shape of it that clearly like you, because I watched it. I didn't see that. I wasn't sure what caused it.
Regardless, it's really funny because everyone's like, oh no, the Catholic Church thing burnt down, but it's like the Stone Templars built that, right? Jacques de Molay was killed there. Like, if you follow the actual sort of facts that you can grasp, and I don't mean understand, I mean like actually find.
I can actually fucking find, which is not easy right now.
There was a fire there before.
Hold on, Earl, please go ahead, Ben.
It's when you look at all of those things, it's like it was actually a stone Templars building And the Stone Templars, to my knowledge, the original ones were feminine worshippers, right? They also speak of that actual site being an Isis ancient pagan Isis thing.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with Catholic Church. That whole entity of itself, like the Roman Catholic Church, is, as far as I'm concerned now, in what we know about words and all that kind of stuff, is the Universal Roman Bank.
Yeah.
That's what that thing is. And in that bank, in their trusts, they have all these sites. And energetically, regardless of who they are, you've still got to go, or what they claim they are, or what they actually are, or where they came from. Those sites, the sites themselves, the sites themselves are sites for a reason. And and rather than like, did someone light it? Who lit it? Was it this? Are they laundering?
Distraction to
it's
me.
like a feminine sacred site was just burnt, right, at the same time as Pluto and Saturn and are doing their thing that they did in the 1500s. So you go and look at what happened in the 1500s, and the same stuff is playing out. So we now have this whole cycle thing going on.
Okay,
and
hold on.
Comprehending
we've got Jules and Megan here. Which one of you brought up the what Ben's talking about in the 1500s? Because we did touch on that, and I think the first
Pluto, I think it was
show.
Megan.
Was it Megan?
Megan typed something up just the other day.
I'm trying to read. There's a bunch of comments going by here. Yeah, it was. Yeah, Jules and Megan both talked about it in the very first show that we did on the astrology stuff. Megan said, as Saturn and Pluto build up in their conjunction, we're going to see Saturn grasping tighter at the patriarchal entrapment structure. 1500 and 1284. Those were the dates. 1500 and 1284.
So in the 1200s is when Unum Sanctum was actually written. I can't remember the exact date. It was 12 something.
I know.
And as I say, it's like the 50. It was earlier than 1284, but the other side of things is like the 1500s. This is when like all these
the Renaissance,
but all our medicinal stuff got taken away in a certain fashion then. So the way that we were able to brew the ingredients that we were brewing with were banned, banished, changed, and exchanged for different things. Yeah. So in that era is also an entire, like, you have to comprehend that these things were fully part of our societal goings on. Yeah. You know, the reason we still have Christmas and Easter is because this is how freaking important these times and periods are, right? Yeah. And we used to do certain things that were taken away. So we're not actually accessing and able to access the bits and pieces that we used to. It's much the same as reading this thing that Jules sent me from Aristotle. Is like, he's talking about these things in the sky that used to be called goats, and it's a certain energy that, yeah, I know.
So what?
And it's
I was distracted by dogs. So, what, goats in the sky?
Yeah, well, no, it's a type of energy coming in. So you had shooting stars, which were one format and the way it was expressed, and then you had torches and goats, and it was like, you start realizing that the terminologies that we use and were used are just like, whoa. It's not that they're different, it's just that they don't exist. He's talking about like red fixtures and chasms in the sky that are this red color, and they like look like this. And then you start thinking how much light pollution there is and what we may be missing
that we can't see
of these signals and signs that we can't see, which is why they've got to have these telescopes so that they can keep up to date with the information that they went and got from the First Nations and make sure
you
that these
mean like the
signals are still
Vatican
happening.
telescope, so the Vatican can keep
Exactly.
up to date with what the fuck is going on?
I think we should call it the Universal Roman Bank from now on, but you know.
The Universal Roman Bank. Yeah, exactly.
URB.
You know what?
URB.
Something funny with all the talks about reparations, I cracked the other day as a German joke. Well, as Germanic people of the tribes back then, don't we have a right to reparations from the Roman Empire too? Like, I mean, if everyone can sue,
If everyone can
That's
sue
part of the
everyone else for
remembering.
reparations. Is there a cutoff date to this, or
that kind of is actually interlaid with they've got to remember who they were first.
yeah?
You know, D, you just post, like, seriously, like, I mean, like, look, let's put everything out on tape. You just posted something of the Queen getting entered into the rights of the Druids.
I know.
So like how significant these peoples across the globe are, and their performances, their ceremonies, their acts, their rituals.
Yep.
How, like, it's still in our system. I mean, the Queen is in the Druidic circle.
I saw that video.
Like
this
the
morning, and it was
esoteric
just like,
order, right? So, like all
ceremony.
these things are done. Yeah, well, it's like I say, you still got to go into like theosophy and clairvoyance have been a part of our political system for centuries. You know, the Americas would not have been approached by England if it wasn't for Dee and Kelly.
Yeah.
Right? Like our entire society is built on our interaction with the eso and exoteric.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we as common people are missing. It's like they've fantasized that side of things so much. Dracula, witches, myths and fables and the occult and yada 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 yada. They've fantasized it so much that we're just like, ha. But
isn't this kind of like the thing? I loved it when Sarian said it. Like, if you talk about Adam and Eve, don't talk about single people, talk about tribes, right? Like, if they were single people, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, well, we have very few retarded people today if they were all related to each other and single people. What is if the idea of vampiric or witches, we are talking about groups, right? We're not talking about a single person, we are talking about a circle or many more people. You know what I mean? Like,
as in, like, sorry to use the word, but as in, like, breeds.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't go so far.
I would say that there were groups of peoples. The color, the whatever, are just expressions of where they are from.
Yeah.
Because there's not much that separates us.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We may be slightly variated genetically, but we're all still classified in the genus of human.
Yep.
Right? Or, right? Homo sapiens sapien, essentially. Yep. However, that there in and of itself in anthropology could be questioned.
Yeah,
because we could say that, that none of those species from Neanderthal all the way through to Homo sapiens sapiens, they were all highly evolved conscious beings. They just had different ways of interacting, and some of those species, I'm not saying, and I'm not even saying lost in the jungle somewhere, maybe walking among us. And I don't mean that in like a NPC or a Matrix way. I mean literally like people with those Neanderthalic, those Denisovian traits are still present in us and in variances of us. So we were that we've got to stop looking at the human race as
separate.
As being different in any way, shape, or form, because what's actually being presented is at one point there was this kind of earth or universal law that literally had these things that occurred that we did at these times, that interacted, that created the outcome.
Yeah, no, I agree.
In our respective areas.
And division. I just wrote a quick article last night before I went to bed. Or was it this morning? I can't remember now. It's like the days and nights all bleed together. Talking about the isms and the ists. And these words are continuously used, and if you look deeply through an article or a video that uses a lot of isms at the end of words, or ists, as in terrorists, as in socialists, as in, when you dig through the actual article and you actually get rid of all the shiny, fluffy stuff, it's all about separation and division. We know that. That's the idea of why there are borders between countries, separation and division. What's the difference between a Canadian and an American? Fucking nothing. It's a border. That's the only difference between Canadians and Americans. We don't even have a language difference, although we do speak, British English as opposed to American English, spelling-wise. But this is it. It's deeply ingrained, and it astounds me more. It doesn't really. We're all used to it now, but that over and over again, it just, everything seems to die off that little bit, like things kind of calm down, and then there will be an event to immediately flame up the divisions again. So we've got the mosque shooting, then we've got the Notre Dame fire, and we've got the fire, the bombings in Sri Lanka, and immediately there's this mass explosion again of the divisionary words between groups. It doesn't matter. It's all humans. Everyone's human. And all these other things are fucking luck of the draw. A lot of it. There was a post that I absolutely love. And it's just a picture of a baby sitting there in a diaper. And it says, when I was born, I was given a country, I was given a language, I was given a religion, and I was given a social insurance number type thing and a birth certificate. But that just depends on where that baby was born. What if the baby was born on the other side of the world? Does that change the child in any way? No. I'm done with the whole divisionary stuff. It's really, really fucking driving me ballistic. Guys, I lasted but sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say is on that whole note of like the whole witches and stuff like that, you've got to look at that more as like, that's just a title. Those were people inside of societal groups.
Yep.
And because otherwise it's just another division. It's like people had different gifts. It's like they stole the philosophers, but people forget about them because they just go, oh, they were philosophers, and they just were like, oh, la, 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 la. But they were a pivotal part of our societies, as were the farmers, as were the and so on. They
all had their talents, like you said.
And what we're doing is, what I'm seeing is we're waking up to all these things. The more that we question, we're like finding those pieces, and we've just got to make sure we put those pieces in order, and we're looking at it as a complete thing, not just that church or. Yep. Sorry. There we go.
There you go. I'm just going to say I lasted a half hour longer than I actually expected I was going to last tonight, but I am going to have to go to bed. Yeah, Elizabeth caught it. She was like, yeah, Danny really looks like she needs to go horizontal. Yeah, I need to go to bed with a hot cup of tea. This was a brilliant conversation tonight, and I'll pass the host over to someone. And like Star, if you're going to take over host, if you want to record it and you can put it up on YouTube and then give me the thing back. If you guys want to continue talking, no problem. I want to just say on Saturday, this coming Saturday, so what's that? 4 days from now, 3 days from now, whatever that mathematically works out to be. I'm going to be doing a Gaia's Garden call. And I'm going to be talking about products and stuff. I'm going to be talking about C60. We're going to be talking about what to use products for, how to use them, how to turn them into the stuff that you want to use, like mixtures that I use for different things, etc., etc. I want to get a conversation going because I've had a lot of people in here, especially the unfuckers, who using various products and had a huge success on different things and coming up with their own mixtures and their own blends of using different oils with different things to work on different problems, etc. So that's the kind of thing I want to focus on is kind of the uses that we're using these things for, like the C60, like the black seed oil especially, etc. So Gaia's Garden will be at the exact same time as this, our same bat time, same bat channel. It'll be here. We will not be live streaming because John won't be available Saturday night for me. So we won't be live streaming, so everything will be here within Zoom, but it will be all recorded, and I'll get it out the next day. So I just want to let everyone know, and I'll put together a big info piece on it so that everyone will know, and the times and et cetera, et cetera. We are going to get the next astrology show together very, very soon. Very, very soon. I say I think Amina's almost over some of the insanity that she's been going through for the last 2 months with her schedule, so she'll have a little more time. So yeah, we have to definitely very, very soon have the next astrology show, because yeah, we got a lot of stuff to discuss on the topic too. And of course Sunday night is Fringe. That's it for me, guys. I'm really sorry. I have to go to bed.
One small step for man.